Ladies and gentlemen, a very good welcome to you to the ESA's workshop on DORA Dry Run Lessons Learned and Data Quality. We suggest we start a little bit later. We're waiting for participants. We have quite a huge number of participants across the world planning to join this event and registered for this event. So we would wait for the numbers of actual connections to go up and then we start. So just wait for a couple of more minutes. Thank you very much for being here on time. Good morning once again, dear ladies and gentlemen. My name is Oleg Shmelyov and I'm from the European Banking Authorities. And on behalf of the European Supervisory Authorities, I would like to welcome you to the joint ESA's workshop on DORA Dry Run exercise. We are still seeing a lot of people connecting at the same time, but in the interest of time, I suggest we start with the event because we have quite a dense agenda in front of you, in front of us, and quite a lot of things to share with you and to discuss. So I will be moderating this event on behalf of the ESA's colleagues, and I will be joined by other colleagues from the various ESAs to speak later on. But before we proceed, some housekeeping remarks which are important for us and important for you to ensure the participation and active participation. This is a moderated event and we are only in the live mode from the presenter side, so you are not able to communicate to us in the team. We will be recording this event. So the slides from this event, together with the recording, will be made available at the ESA's websites and specifically on the dedicated website, which we have created for the dry run. And we can cover that website later on in the presentation slides. In order for you to communicate with us and ask questions, we will be using Slido application, where you can scan this barcode, what you see here, and also you're seeing that on every slide in this presentation. So you can scan the barcode and then submit your question, and then the questions will be moderated. And then once the questions are available there, you can upvote the questions and like the questions. So for this is the same app we have been using already in the past events during the dry run. So you should be familiar with that. Now, in terms of the questions, we will be able to accept and answer the questions regarding the dry run exercise and also the preparations for 2025 reporting, which we will be covering during this workshop. We will not be able to cover the questions regarding specific entities. So don't pose those questions, they will not be accepted. And we will not be able also to provide you with the training on how to fill the registers of information. This is not the format of this exercise. So we'll try to answer as many of the general questions as possible. And then we will see the way how to come back to you on some other questions which we will not be able to answer during this event. But in any case, you will see all the transcripts, all the materials are there. If you don't want to see your name being featured on the questions, then post your question anonymously. There is no penalization from that, from our side for anonymous questions, but this is just if you want to protect your anonymity for the purpose of the recording of this event. Now, As I mentioned, we have quite a dense agenda ahead of you and ahead of us. So we will kick the meeting with the opening remarks by Mark Andreas, our Director of Joint DORA Oversight for the ESAs. Then we will provide you the overview of the dry run exercise, focusing on the key aspects regarding the data quality assurance process and key findings from that data quality assurance process. Then we will summarize the lessons learned from the dry run exercise, same lessons learned which are also available in the summary report which we have published yesterday. So if you go to the ESA's website, you can find all details of the things we are going to talk about today. Then we would like to have a second part of the workshop dedicated to the preparations for 2025 reporting. And we will particularly outline key changes compared to the dry run exercise, what are coming to the 2025 reporting following the adoption by the European Commission of the ITS on the registers of information, which is the basis for the content of the registers of information. And then we will finish with the questions and answer session, which will be based on the moderated Slido questions. So we will pick up the questions from the Slido, which colleagues are moderating, and then we will try to answer as many as possible during this event. So this is what lies ahead of us for this next 3 hours. And with these introductory remarks, I pass over to Mark Andres, who will give his opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Oleg, and happy to join this exciting workshop online with an impressive number of participants from all over the world. So I can see that this exercise has attracted a lot of attention, which is very good for the preparation of DORA and the implementation of the new requirements coming from this piece of regulation in 2025. So let me try to briefly introduce the workshop and provide you with some of the key elements that I would like to highlight. First of all, it's important to remind everyone that the registers of information for the ICT outsourcing arrangements will become mandatory based on DORA. And I know that some of the financial entities, they were already having registers of information or similar arrangements in place, but for some of us, it might be a little bit new and probably difficult in all cases to adapt to the new taxonomy that is required by the regulation. This dry run exercise that the ESAs have decided to organize was exactly meant for this, just to make sure that all financial entities in Europe subject now to this DORA regulation will be able to test their capacities, their capabilities to provide their competent authorities with the information on their ICT outsourcing arrangements, and ultimately that the ESAs will be able to draw from these registers of information the useful piece of information that we need for another element coming with DORA, which is the oversight of the major or crucial or critical ICT third-party provider, the CTPPs, critical third-party providers. So what I can observe from the result of the dry run is very encouraging. First, I can see that there was a high participation rate. You can see the number, more than 1,000 financial entities, covering all the different types of financial entities subject to DORA, and all the EU member states participated into the exercise. So taking into account the fact that it was under a very high time pressure, and it was the first time, that's really encouraging to see a very high participation rate. What we can see, of course, is that the registers that we received were subject to data quality issues, and we will comment on that. We were not surprised. That's, of course, the occasion to better learn from the taxonomy, from what is required exactly, just to make sure that from the different sources that you have, you can provide the right data to us. For that, and to ease the process, DSS had provided tools, some materials, organized some workshops already, and provided a FAQ to support everyone in the exercise and to help provide the best quality registers. And today we are also organizing this workshop. It comes just after the publication of a report providing the high-level observations that we could make on data quality. So, of course, no wonder we are, of course, cautious about how well we can improve together the data quality of your registers, the registers that we will receive, to make sure that we have accurate data to work on. Let me also highlight some key takeaways, and first of all, commenting on this data quality thing. So for us, it's again very encouraging to see that we had already 6.5% of the submitted registers which passed with no fail the data quality checks. And for the remaining ones, 50 of them had less than 5 out of 116 data quality checks failed, which is pretty also encouraging. So at this stage, we can see that we can work with the data. That's what we are saying. But of course, we would like additional efforts to be provided by everyone. So this workshop is really the occasion to learn better about what is expected, the most common mistakes or failures that we could see, and we very much do hope that you can take this for yourself and improve the process at your place with all the different stakeholders involved to make sure that when we will receive the first official collection of the registers later on in April and May, we will have a better level of quality. Talking about that, one big message that I would like also to convey to you all today is that for sure you will face probably conflicting objectives, like whether or not you should go for more complete information. And by the way, during the dry run, it was admitted that sometimes the registers could not be fully complete, but we wanted nevertheless to have the best extracts that you could make. So one objective could be completeness. Another one could be data quality. Of course, we will continue to prioritize data quality, even if normally the registers that you will submit should be the most complete possible. And also we can see that the use of the identifiers for the providers is absolutely necessary. So that's also a very important area where to improve your data quality, and I'm sure that Oleg and the colleagues will comment further on that. With this being said, I would like to give back the floor to Oleg for the continuation of the workshop. Thank you very much, and good luck for the work to come. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Mark. Definitely very important key messages and takeaways, and we will be picking up on some of them later in the slides, so you will hear more details, especially on the points of the key takeaways. So we will come back to that and hold on your questions on that. You may find answers already on the next slides. So without further ado, some high-level overview of the dry run exercise, starting from the walk down the memory line, where we have started this journey together with more than 1,000 of you and others who were supporting the exercise back in April this year, where, as Mark said, we came with the proposal to organize this exercise and to help you with the preparations of the registers and reporting of the registers. Then the next key milestone was reached in May when we published materials for the dry run exercise, and this was quite an unprecedented amount of the support which we have provided. Then we organized during the exercise 2 workshops back in April and then in June to talk about the tools, materials, and the reporting approach. So this is our 3rd workshop today, and we've been engaging with you through various channels during this exercise, including through the FAQ documents, direct contacts by me, emails, and these workshops. Then the data we have opened the window from July to August to receive the data, and the key important milestone for us was 6th of September when we froze the data and used this data for the analysis. So everything what you are seeing today in terms of the figures, the data quality assessments, and all these observations is based on the data which has been frozen on the 6th of September. Then by the end of September and also in the beginning of October, we've shared the feedback with the competent authorities, so who have been providing this feedback back to the participating entities in their jurisdictions. If you have submitted the register and have not received the feedback, then most probably you are amongst the 6.5% of the financial entities who have not failed any data quality checks and did not receive feedback. So congratulations to if you did not receive the feedback. Then 17 December, yesterday was the key day when we published the summary report, and we're closing this event with dry run exercise with the workshop today. So this has been a journey through the summer when you've been working hard on getting the registers, and we were here to support you during this journey. Speaking about the support, the important element of the dry run, just to recall, was the tools that we have prepared and we have provided to you for this exercise. The tools were about the registers. We gave you the template for the register of information, Excel file for the filling. We've also provided examples. We also provided FAQ on how to covering the filling of the templates, using the tools, and about the whole dry run. Then we also provided quite a lot of tools for reporting to familiarize you with the data point model. We published for the dry run the first draft data point model in the annotated table layout, explaining how the codes work, how the interactions works, and how the keys work, so the relationship within the data model. We also provided draft taxonomy. We also provided the sample reporting package to ensure that you know how to prepare zip files with the CSV files inside of them. And for the dry run, we also provided the tool, VBA macro-based tool, to help with the conversion of the Excels to the CSV. Now, all these tools are still there and available for you also, not only for the participants to the dry run, but also to the wider industry. But there are a few important caveats to mention, and I already see the questions in Slido regarding the future templates and things like that. So here is important point to stress that everything here you had for the dry run, and we made it for the test in the test environment to help you with the preparations. Everything here was based on the draft ITS. So we used the version of the implementing technical standard, which was published by the ESAs in January 2024. And if you followed the regulatory saga, then you know that the standard was rejected by the Commission, and there was an opinion on the rejection, and then there was a long discussion. And then we have finally the adoption of the standard only now at the end of November. So the materials which have been made available for the dry run do not reflect the final ITS. They reflect the draft ITS from January 2021. Also, all the data point models and everything in taxonomy was based on that draft ITS. So this was presented for the dry run in the draft form and cannot be directly used for the final reporting. Now, I'll come back to later on to what tools we will make available and what support will be there for the steady state for the official reporting from 2025 onwards. But we already here to anticipate we will not be able, for example, to maintain the Excel templates for the filling, because we do not think that the Excel is the correct tool to be used for the actual keeping of the register of information, because the register being the relational database, you need to see the connections, you need to see the dependencies, and Excel is not suited, and the spreadsheet, the format of the Excel is not suited for that purpose. So we will not be updating the templates for the actual register. They will be in the data point model, and I will explain that a little bit later on today. We will also not be able to maintain the conversion tool. So we made this XLS to CSV conversion for the dry run exercise, giving that this was the educational journey for the participants and also for us, but we are not able to maintain it and update it and have it as a tool for the industry. It is for the industry themselves, for the financial entities, to identify it and find better suited tools for them for the actual register keeping, because the register of information is above all the internal risk management tool, and then to have the solution to facilitate reporting based on the tools what you are actually using for the register keeping. So there will be no possibility to have this VBA macro updated for the official reporting. So I think this is important message to strike already here, recalling on the tools from the dry run. Now, in terms of the participation in the dry run, Mark already mentioned that we had quite a wide range of the financial entities across the EU. So we have 1,139 originally expressing interest in joining the exercise, and in the end we have 1,039 financial entities submitting their registers. 947 of those registers have been accepted for the analysis, and my colleagues later are going to explain what's the difference and what sort of the data quality analysis and assurance we applied, and why there is a difference between the submitted and analyzed registers. But you see here on these tables, the submitted registers have been very widely representing the whole of the EU and the whole of the spectrum of the DORA financial entities types. So we had almost everything covered, with the majority being banks, insurance and reinsurance undertakings and investment firms, which is natural given their weight in the financial across the financial sectors. But we also have some niche players and new players and emerging players, and even under the we had received registers for the financial entities which are still being authorized under MiCA. For example, we have crypto asset service providers being introduced under the MiCA, still being authorized, but they wanted to participate in the exercise and be prepared for the DORA, which is remarkable, and we really appreciate this interest. Now, important and interesting point was that the registers, most of the registers, 58% of them have been submitted to us on the consolidated basis. So the actual coverage of the financial entities covered by the registers of information increases to almost 3,500, which is remarkable. And again, in the if we look at the consolidated registers, we still have the majority being the credit institutions and the insurance undertakings. But interestingly, we have also within the compositions of the group non-financial entities being reported that are being part of the registers. This is quite an interesting observation based on the content of the registers, what financial entities reported in template B0102. Now, some other key facts and observations regarding the exercise to mention is that we have quite a wide coverage of the functions. So the functions is the own financial entities' own functions, which they have identified, which are being necessary for the performance of their business operations, and then later on through the register, the financial entities mapping the functions to the ICT services supporting those functions and things like that. So in terms of the functions, we have almost 18,400 functions identified, of which 80% of them be identified as critical and important. So this is quite an important point to make, that most of the functions identified in the register are critical and important. And this is also explanation of the testament to the design of the register, which is built around the proportionality on the notion of the criticality and importance of the functions, because for the critical and important functions and for the ICT services supporting critical and important functions, financial entities need to provide additional information, more information. We also have identified in this pool of information we have received, we also identified around 25,000 unique contractual arrangements with the ICT third-party providers, so the core of the register, what is being recorded. And we also identified around 10,000 unique third-party providers of various sizes, from the largest to the smallest ones. So this exercise has given quite a good overview of what is in the registers, and also helps us to design on our end processes, better design processes, and prepare for the designation of the critical ICT third-party providers, which we will be doing based on the official reporting, official registers, which we are going to receive from you next year. Apologies. Now, during the exercise, we have tried our best to offer as much support as possible to the participants and also to the wider interested stakeholders. As I mentioned, we have already 2 workshops, today being the 3rd one. We have also 3 updates of the frequently asked questions document with 127 questions asked and answered about the exercise, about the templates, about how to fill in the templates. So we saw those FAQ document as a helpful tool to help you as much as possible with preparing the registers. We also run a direct line in the emails, and over the summer we've been answering emails, and we had more than 350 emails, and most of the answers was coming from the colleagues who will be also speaking today. And I'm also pleased to see that some of the colleagues who are joining today were also the ones who asked questions, and we had a good interaction during those email exchanges. And importantly, we draw a lot of lessons learned. We draw the lessons learned for the ESAs, for ourselves, based on all these interactions, based on the questions from the workshops and the interactions through the FAQ, interactions through the emails. We have used every opportunity to update and clarify the instructions in the ITS on the Register of Information. So all this question, well, most of the questions, I cannot say all, most of the questions you asked and where we identified there might be an issue, we try to address already in the updated ITS. And we also use this interaction to help us to adjust and prepare the validation rules and the reporting process and the quality assurance process for the 2025 official reporting. So this interaction has been immensely useful for us, and I hope that it was also helpful for you on the industry side. In terms of data quality, my colleague is going to speak about that later on, but as Mark said, we have 6.5 registers successfully passing all the data quality checks. Out of the remaining 50% failed, less than 5 data quality checks, which is a good indicator considering that the exercise was done on the best effort basis. And we expressly gave instructions in the beginning of the exercise that submit to us on best effort basis what you have. So if you did not have some data points which are important for us and they were missing, obviously this has been highlighted as the data quality issue. So this drives the data quality figures somewhat down, but this was expected and this was intentional because we wanted you to start moving in their preparations as much as possible. So now you get the feedback and then you have the chance to improve these registers. As Mark mentioned, is the use of identifiers is the most tricky point, and we will spend some more time today on speaking about the identifiers. And important, and I will come back to that also in the lessons learned, is the following the instructions. That sometimes what we saw from the questions and the interactions was very obvious in the instructions. So please do read the instructions in the ITS, which is now there, which has been updated. And this is actually going to help also with the future interactions and the preparations. Now, with this high-level overview in mind, I suggest that we go now into more nitty-gritty details on the quality assurance and the data quality findings, and I hand over to my colleague Valentina, who will walk you through this.
Many thanks, Oleg, for giving me the floor. Good morning to all the participants of the workshop. My name is Valentina Drigani, and I work as a statistician at the European Banking Authority. In the next section, we will provide some more details on the data quality assurance process that the ESAs conducted on the submissions received as part of the dry run. And we will also present some key findings from this data quality assurance process. If you could put on the next slide, please, Oleg. Thank you. So with this first slide, we would like to present the data quality assurance process that was conducted. So the ESAs ran a two-step data quality assurance process on each submission received for the dry run. Such process consisted of two layers, the first being integration checks and the second data quality checks. Integration checks consisted of a set of three technical checks that were run upon reception and were aimed at ensuring that a submission could be processed. To ensure that the submission could be processed, three prerequisites had to be respected. First, the naming convention for the zip file had to be respected. This naming convention was provided in the instructions for reporting. Second, of course, it didn't make much sense to test submissions that were completely empty or whenever exact copies of the examples files that these as published were received. So these were discarded. And third, the submission needed to contain information on the entity maintaining the register that was provided in template B0101. As it was the only way to identify the sender of the submission. Failing any of these three integration checks implied that the submission was discarded and unfortunately was not processed further. Instead, submissions that successfully passed these three integration checks were subject to a second layer of checks, which consisted of 116 data quality checks, which can be split into 5 main thematic areas. So first, the keys of each template should be unique and not repeated. For most of the templates, the key is a combination of the fields of that template. Secondly, LEI codes provided should be valid when compared with an official source. In our case, we chose the Glyph database. Moreover, the use of the members from the draft DPM published as part of the dry run materials should be respected. As a fourth kind of check, we have the provision of mandatory information. So even if the exercise was conducted on a best effort basis, and these are grateful for any effort that was made, even when submitted incomplete templates, the ESAs flagged when the information deemed necessary for the designation of critical third-party providers were missing. This in the spirit of helping helping financial entities to prepare for the official reporting that will take place in 2025. And last, whenever we ask for a date value, then this date should be valid. I have seen already in the slide that some users were asking where are the 116 data quality checks that were conducted. So these should have been transmitted by the national competent authorities to participating entities, but they are also available as an annex to the report that was published yesterday, to the conclusive report for the dry run. So all these informations are available to you. Could we please move to the next slide, Oleg? Thank you. So now we can see a bit some results of the data quality assurance process. Integration checks and data quality checks were run after the freeze date for the submissions. So we chose, of course, we chose a date after which we would not consider submissions coming in anymore, and this was the 6th of September. Then, once the data quality assurance process was completed on the ESA side, individual feedback for each entity that participated to the dry run exercise was shared with competent authorities at the end of September. So every participant should have received feedback by now. If no feedback has been received, then it could mean two things. Either there were no checks failing, which is very good news. And this is the 6.5% that Mark and Oleg have already mentioned of entities that did not fail any quality check, or there could have been an issue with the transmission of the feedback from the National Competent Authority. So when in doubt, please contact your National Competent Authority. The individual feedback included feedback on both layers of the data quality assurance process, so feedback on which integration checks led to exclusion, if any, or detailed feedback on failing data quality checks with each record affected by data quality issue to help the financial entity see exactly where it would need to act for official reporting. The list of the checks were also shared for transparency. Okay, we can now examine some statistics on the data quality assurance process. So, as it has been already mentioned, we have received a little over 1,000 submissions, of which 9% failed integration checks and were hence discarded. For the remaining 91% of the submissions that were accepted and screened for data quality checks, we are left then with 947 submissions on which the conclusive report is based. Out of these submissions, as already mentioned, 6.5% did not fail any check. And of the remaining, 50% failed less than 5 checks, which is, I would say, a good news, given also the best effort nature of the exercise. However, we observe big dispersion in terms of results, because the maximum number of checks failing for a given entity is, for instance, 43 out of 160. So we have entities that failed almost half of the set of data quality checks that were developed. Could we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you, Oleg. Let's continue on seeing a bit the results of the process. Now, to give you an idea of the total number of data points that registered data quality checks overall that we received, this is a bit over 2,300 data points that had issues, but this is of course proportional to the number of data points submitted. The overall ratio of data points with data quality issues on data points submitted is 2.5%. And this ratio varies by type of financial entity, as you can see from the table below. So for some kinds of financial entity, this ratio was higher. For others, it was lower. Some examples of this ratio for the types of financial entities that sent more submissions are 1.9%, so just below the average for credit institutions, 2.4% for investment firms, so on the average, and slightly above the average, 3.3% for insurance and reinsurance companies. And here you have the table if you wish to run comparison or to just have the distribution of the by the type of financial entity. Could we move on to the next slide where we can see the failed data quality checks by type? So here on the left side of the slide, there is a pie chart showing the distribution of failures by type of check. So these are the 5 types of check of which we spoke at the beginning of the presentation. From there, you may see that the issue that was registered more frequently was the fact that mandatory information was missing. So as said before, these were key fields identified as being essential for the designation of critical third-party providers. And this result is not surprising due to the exercise being run on a best effort basis. However, we believed it was important to raise awareness on this point, since for the official reporting that will take place in 2025, all the fields will be mandatory, although there will be a slightly modified version of the templates, but all the fields included in the new templates will be mandatory. And as a consequence, missing values will trigger a warning and possibly a resubmission request. In terms of information, types of information that were missing the most, two of the fields are the identification codes for ICT providers and their parents, for which we registered an important percentage of missings. Another type of check that registered many failings was the provision of invalid LEI codes when checking for their validity in live. This finding too was expected, though an unexpected finding was that the higher proportion of invalid LEI codes was observed for financial entities rather than for third-party providers. In many instances, the problem was that the identifiers were missing rather than invalid, or that, for instance, national codes, VAT numbers were provided, but were indicated as LEI in the type of identifier. So this was these two findings are essentially the ones that are more important and that we wanted to convey to you. Then moving on to the last slide. We can see now that this was a learning exercise for the ESAS tool. And as a matter of fact, we had to deactivate some checks that proved to be wrongly designed. These checks have been already excluded from the results presented in the final report and from the count of the total checks that have failed. And we also have provided this communication whenever receiving questions on these checks. The checks that were deactivated are three. So the first one is DORA 21, which was formulated as the key values in the template that contains information on contractual arrangements. So the key values there were some columns that identify the contract, the entity making use of the ICT service, and the provider. Should not be repeated. This check was not badly designed per se, but in the FAQ we gave contradicting instructions because we instructed we provided a reply to multiply the entries for these fields in case of multiple locations for data storage and data management. So whenever this was done, it was indicated in the FAQ, but it triggered an error, and so this error has been deactivated. The second error that has been deactivated is DORA 94, which was formulated as the value in the template with functions identification, so template B0601. Column 60, which is the reason for criticality or importance, should not be missing. However, this field was indicated as optional in the instructions. And then a similar glitch, let's say, happened for DORA 117, where as in the case for DORA 94, the value in the reason for criticality or importance should only be filled in when the criticality assessment is populated with yes, but this field was, as said before, optional. So these checks have been deactivated, and there are other checks that couldn't be fully deactivated because they still hold, depending on some some conditions being satisfied, but they should be better formulated. And this was also taken into account in the preparation of the official, let's say, validation rules for official reporting. These are the checks that could be disregarded based on what on the specific conditions are DORA 91 and 92. These checks consider the parent undertakings identifier and the type of identifier as mandatory fields, but these should be only mandatory when the third-party provider reporting in the same template is not already a parent undertaking. And also we have checked DORA 52, where the currency of the amount reported for the total annual expense or estimated cost of the ICT provider was considered as a mandatory field, but actually the total annual expense for the provider is not applicable to subcontractors. So this check shouldn't have been run when a subcontractor was reported. And as we said, the experience from the dry run has been really useful for us in designing the data quality checks for official reporting. So with this, we would conclude the part of the presentation on data quality checks.
Thank you very much, Valentina. And just a testament of that, that we took our lessons and we also were adjusting processes. So it was a learning exercise and a journey both for the financial entities and for us. This deactivations and problematic data quality checks, which you have seen here, this is something what we've designed sometimes erroneously. You gave us feedback, and then we try to clarify and fix them for the official reporting, either through the adjusting the validation rules and data quality checks for the official reporting, or through clarifying instructions. For example, on this checks which has been disregarded, and what Valentina mentioned, and I saw also questions in Slido regarding the similar checks, we have provided clarifying instructions. So what to do, what to report as the parent and ultimate parent undertaking for the third-party provider, for example, or for the financial entity if the register is being reported on the individual basis, if there is no parent. So if you're standalone provider or standalone financial entity, so in this case, for example, we have clarified that for the parent field, you need to repeat the same identifier what you use for yourself. And this is in the updated instructions. And this will ensure that we will be able to run these data quality checks in the official reporting, but we will not pick the false responses for the standalone entity. So this is important point to keep in mind and important learning exercise both for us and for you. Right. So moving next to the key lessons learned, and then I already started talking about that this key lessons learned, starting for the lessons learned for us, is to review, clarify, and reporting instructions. That the first lessons learned we took, and this we had a unique opportunity since the fact that the ITS was rejected by the Commission, it wasn't yet adopted. So we had a time window where we tried to rectify as many issues as possible and provide clarifications and make changes. So I saw also in the Slido questions whether there is a track changes version of the ITS. No, there is no track changes version. But if you go into the opinion, what the ESAs have published on the opinion on the rejections of the ITS by the Commission, so on the 15th October, and here on the slide you have a link to that opinion, there you will see the track changes version where we are suggesting to introduce changes to the Commission. And those suggestions were reflected to the point of the actual matter of the rejections or the reason for the rejections, introduction of the EU ID. I'll come back to that later on today. But we also use this opportunity to put as many changes as possible from the dry run feedback. So there you will have a final track changes. So what you can use for the preparation purposes. So the delta is explained there. And I'm happy to say that most of the comments, well, literally everything of that from those comments were incorporated into the final ITS, which was adopted by the Commission. There are a few other changes there in the final ITS, which I'll come back later on. Now, another important lesson learned for us was to adjust and finalize the data point model. So that all the questions and the examples which Valentina gave you on her slide on the multiplying of the values and what to do if we have the additional rows, but then we have some key values and then there will be a duplication of the keys, which is not allowed by the data point model. So how to deal with that? We have took this lesson from the exercise and from the interaction with you guys, and then we reflect it in the data point model. Now here we already try to anticipate as much as possible. So this DORA exercise is actually unprecedented from the ESA side because we try to put as much information as possible as early as possible. So usually we would wait for the finalization for the reporting purpose. I mean, usually we would wait for the finalization of the regulatory requirements, in this case ITS, and then we will come up with a reporting technical package. But here, recognizing the importance and the novelty of the DORA reporting of the register of information for many of you, we try to help as early as possible. So 15th of November is when we published revised data model. So it's not the data point model, which is going to come later, but we published the data model. So you see all the relations between the data fields, you see all the keys, and how they interact between the various templates and link various templates. And we also published a set of the draft validation rules reflecting all the feedback, and that is available already for your perusal, for your preparations from 15 November. The formal technical reporting technical package is going to come later, and we are aiming to publish it before Christmas. So in the coming days, you should have the publication of the formal reporting technical package, which will be reflecting the ITS changes, so the formal ITS as adopted by the Commission will be translated into the final data point model, final taxonomy, and final validation rules. But the updated draft reflecting the 15th of October opinion is there. You have a link here for 15 November. Now, turning to the important lessons learned for the industry, here I would start with the completeness. And as Mark said already in his introductory remarks, that we need to have the registers as complete as possible with the good data quality. Because if you submit the registers with the missing information, then you already saw from the dry run that if these data fields are mandatory, if these data fields are important for us for the purposes of the CTPP designation, you will get the data quality feedback requiring you to resubmit the information. So we will not be able to operate with the missing data fields because we need to use this information for the purposes of the designation of the critical ICT third-party provider. So the completeness is the key. Don't miss the mandatory information in your records. So if something is there, it is there for the reason. Now, another important point to keep in mind for you is adherence to the instructions. In the ITS, and also considering what I just said about the updates of the ITS and all the instructions based on the feedback and based on the experience from the dry run, there are general instructions to the templates, which are telling you how to fill a template, the purpose of the template, what should be there and how it should be there. And then there are additional data field specific instructions. So please read them carefully when you are preparing the registers and when you're preparing the registers for the submission. This is a lot of the things which have been raised in the FAQ, a lot of the things which we have seen in these bilateral exchanges over this email channel. A lot of things are in the instructions, and now there is even more because we have reflected the questions which we have been giving to you during the dry run in the instructions. Another important point is to follow the data point model. So if the things which are not in the instructions, the drop downs are in the data point model, they implement it there and then they implement it through the keys. So please follow the instructions, please follow the clarifications in the data point model, which is published also in quite a user-friendly Excel form of the annotated table, where you have for every template, you have all the data fields, you have the explanations of the potential possible values to be used there. If we talk about some drop-down values, and then we have also indication of the keys and some additional clarifications. So for the preparations for the official reporting in 2025, the instructions in the ITS and the data point model and the annotated table is probably the two most important things for you to keep in mind and to ensure that the data is of good quality. Now, another important lesson from the exercise is that, well, you will need also to adapt the registers to the final regulatory requirements. As I mentioned before, the register was run based on the draft ITS from January 2024. After that, we've seen the rejection of the ITS and the changes of the ITS, and then the finalization of the ITS, which happened on the 29th of November. And then we have the official journal publication from the beginning of December. So the final text is already there, available for your perusal. And there are two fundamental changes there, or two key changes. First is the introduction of the EUID as an alternative identifier for the third-party providers. So this necessitated also the changes to the templates of the ITS and the introduction of the additional data fields. And I'm going to explain all these changes later on in the presentation, so we'll come back to that. And then there is another point, which is a simplification in my view, is to remove the requirement to maintain expired contracts. So you will recall that in the ESA's version, ESA's proposals, there was a requirement to maintain the registers to maintain expired contracts for 5 years in the registers. So the Commission has dropped that. So the historic contracts no longer need to be in the reported registers. So there is some adaptation for you to do after the dry run and to collect additional data points based on the original templates and also considering the revised templates. Now, this collection of the additional data points is extremely important for when we speak about the identifiers, because the register is the relational database and the identifiers is the key. Identifiers of the financial entities, identifiers of the third-party providers, identifiers of the contracts, identifiers of the functions. So this is the key, where we have some internal identifiers which are in your control when we talk about functions, when we talk about the contracts, but then we have external identifiers when we talk about the things which are important for the entities. And here we have the need to have the identifiers for the financial entities, which are either submitting entities, so either those who are holding the register and identified in template B0101, or the entities belonging to the group when we talk about the group reporting, so everything which is listed in B0102. And there, for the financial entities under DORA, the only applicable indicator identifier is the LAI code. And this is very important. This is something with what the supervisory community has been working already for years across different segments of the financial sector, but as highlighted by the dry run, we also identified some entities, financial entities who do not have LAI. So colleagues, if you are a financial entity in the scope of the DORA, and I recall DORA is quite wide in its scope, it has 21 financial entity types, and you don't have an LAI, please act now, please go and obtain an LAI, because without LAI, you will not be able to report and you will not be able to meet your obligations under DORA and comply with the DORA requirements. So the LAIs is mandatory for the financial entities, whereas for the third-party providers, there is a different story. There is, depending whether the third-party provider is the legal entity or not, and for the legal entity, there is a possibility to use LAI or European identifier, EUID, and then there is a wider choice of identifiers provided for the natural persons or private persons who are acting in the business capacity. So this, again, I will go into touch later on because this is extremely important point in the changes of the ITS, so I'll come back to that. Now, another important point to keep in mind is preparations for the actual reporting of the registers. And I've seen already some questions on the slide regarding the format. So hopefully this is going to answer this question. So the register information is above all your internal risk management tool. And the internal risk management tool, you need to find the most appropriate technical solution for maintaining the register. And we have questions whether we will provide an Excel template for the register. The answer is unlikely. We are going to provide this because we don't believe that Excel is the tool for the actual maintaining of the register. The Excel can be used for as an intermediate step for the visual representations to help to prepare with the CSV files which are used for the reporting, but we don't believe that this is the most appropriate tool for the actual maintaining of the register, given the relational nature of the register. So as this is the tool for the third-party risk management, you need to find the most appropriate tools for your organization. Now, when it comes to the reporting, for the reporting, we are more strict in terms of the reporting to the ESAs. And here the reporting format is the plain CSV format that we used in the dry run exercise. So it's exactly the same approach. What was used in the dry run exercise. You will need to prepare a zip file, which contains several CSV files for each of the reported templates, and then the JSON file, which is providing metadata. And this zip file needs to be named according to the provided naming conventions, and then this needs to be submitted. So this is exactly the same approach with the plain CSV format, and the taxonomy for the CSV is provided as part of the technical package. So this is going to be published in the coming days. So this is the, let's say, 5 broad areas of the key lessons learned for the industry, which we also highlighted in the report published yesterday. Now, I would really like to
So just
Do you hear me? I lost a voice.
Yes, we can hear you now, Oleg.
Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot. Apologies for this technical glitch. Now, with this in mind, I would like to draw I would like to turn the page on the dry run exercise and move to the 2025 reporting, which is another important thing which we would like to cover during this workshop review. Right, and before that, before going to the actual details of the reporting, I really wanted to remind you the triple nature of the register of information, because this is very important to keep in mind. And I've been talking already the fact that the register of information is the internal tool, internal risk management tool. Then the register of information is important source of information for the competent authorities for their supervisory purposes. And then for the ESAs, we will be using the registers of information for the purposes of the designation of the critical third-party providers, which will be subject to the DORA oversight. But this is extremely important to keep in mind that the register may be difficult, and the register may be complex. It may have different degrees of information which are being used by various parties in this triangle. Something is important for the competent authorities, something is important only for us, for the ESAs, for the purposes of the designation of the critical ICT third-party providers. But since this is all part of the register, this is there, and then the registers need to cater for all of these three elements. Now, I've been mentioning already several times that we have the implementing technical standard for the content of the registers of information, and now this has been finally approved, so the regulation is there as a Commission implementing regulation EU 2024/2956. Here you have a link to the official journal publication, so this is all legitimate now, all legit. And this provides the content of the register of information, and then this is the basis. Now, for the ITS on the register of information, I've mentioned already several times that we had a bit of the journey to get it there after the January publication of the final report, but now we are there. The ITS has been adopted, and the ITS reflects quite a lot of changes, well, basically everything, what we have been suggesting as the ESAs, in our opinion, on the rejections of the ITS by the EU Commission. So from the 15th October, you have, I might say that you have more or less final text of the ITS. And if we go into the key changes which are there are simplifications introduced by the Commission, the removal of the requirement to maintain the expired contracts in the registers. And I've seen the slide or question pointing to that okay, this 5-year removal requirement has been removed. So what about the retention period? Well, the retention period is for the financial entities themselves to set up for based on their contract management. So this, we are not regulating the retention period in this context of the register. Then there was an important addition from the EU Commission, which was subject to the opinion, and ESAs were quite critical, if I recall the text of the opinion, about the introduction of the alternative identifier for the third-party providers, EUID. But the text, it is as it is. It gives the flexibility for the financial entities to identify the third-party providers using LAI or EUID, or provide both if available. Again, since this is the so big change, I will come back to that in more detail. But there have been also quite a lot of additional simplifications and clarifications from our side, from the dry run exercise, where if I can highlight a few, the most important ones, we have tried to align the text as much as possible with the integrated data dictionary. So usually we have the ITS, which is usually the reporting ITSs, which we have, let's say, for the prudential reporting purposes, and then we use the data point model, and then we try to integrate everything as possible. Here we try to do the same, but considering that this is a quite a difficult challenge since we have we're working on integrated reporting for the prudential purposes in the banks. There is similar work going in the insurance sector. We also later on try to integrate the reporting between the banks and insurance, have the common data dictionaries and things like that. But here we have dealing with unprecedented amount of cross-sectoral financial entities, and some of them have not been subject to any of the prudential reporting before. So we try to integrate as much as possible with the existing prudential reporting, and since it's the European Banking Authority who is providing the solution, reporting solutions for the registers for information for the ESAs, we try to align this as much as possible with our existing work. So for the credit institutions, for example, reporting the registers, a lot of things should be quite familiar in the data dictionary, and we're using the same definitions, the same codes. So there should be quite an easy transition if you are dealing already with the prudential reporting. Now, we also made important clarifications with respect to the coverage of the firms, and I'm using firms here because I want to collectively refer to the financial entities and the third-party providers. And here we clarify what sort of financial entities need to be reported in template B0102. And here we talk about the reporting of the registers at the consolidated basis. So everything, what is it? All financial entities which are in the scope of the consolidation of the register being reported on the consolidation basis. So the below scope of the consolidation should be reported in that template, all financial entities. You don't need to report all of the companies which you have. So all non-financial entities were covered by the register because the focus of the register is on the financial entities in this particular segment. The important point to keep in mind that you also need to report yourself. So we also saw quite often in the dry run that financial entities are forgetting to add themselves. They're adding themselves in 0102 template, but not in 0102. Sorry, they're adding themselves in 0101, which is, let's say, the entity who is maintaining the register, but not in 0102. So in 0102, what we need to get is the full scope of financial entities covered by the register within the scope of consolidation. There was also a question I saw in slide, what about the third party, what about the standalone reporting, and what about the third country groups? Do we need to go up in scope of the consolidation to the outside of the EU if we're dealing with the non-EU groups? So the question is no, you don't need to go up. It's the consolidation below. And if you're a solo entity, you need to report at least yourself there. So this we have clarified in the instructions, and therefore, as I mentioned, this is extremely important to read the instructions and follow the instructions. What we also clarified is the instructions for the third-party providers, which need to be reported in template 0501. Sorry, and this is again from the register, and we saw in the register that apologies. We saw in the register that quite often parents are not reported. So you have the financial third-party provider there, but not its parent undertaking. We also saw not all intragroup financial entities, intragroup third-party service providers reported in template B0501. However, they are reported in B0102, which is for the financial entities. So we have also clarified those elements. So now it should be clear. And again, your feedback and the discussions which we had during the dry run was super helpful for that. We have also introduced changes into the ITS, which are necessary for the implementation of the EU ID, and introduce additional data fields. Come back to that later. We simplified the approach to the reporting of the currencies, because in the draft ITS, you have had some conversion requirements, and we've been asked a lot how to do the conversions. So what is actually now simplified is that everywhere you have a currency, you have the currency value. So you report contracts in the same contractual currency, and then you report both the value of the contract and also the currency of the contract. So it should be straightforward, and that has been clarified. Apologies. We have also clarified the instructions how to deal with the contractual arrangements with the subcontractors. So what to do if you have the external contracts, external TTP third-party providers and their subcontractors, and then the first leg there needs to be reported as the contractual arrangements, and then everything else, the ranks 2 and 3 will need to be reported as the supply chain assessment without actual information on the contracts, because those contracts are outside of the scope of the influence of you or the third-party providers you are dealing with. And then for the intragroup service providers, we clarify that you actually need to record the contracts with the intragroup service providers and with their external providers, so the subcontractors, because this is in the scope of influence of financial entity and intergroup service provider. And something which Valentina also mentioned already on the additional rows. So we have also clarified in instructions that if you have some multiple values where you have only possibility to give just one value. So for example, location of the data is a very good example of that. Location of the data, you may have data centers hosting your data in several countries. So essentially you need to repeat different rows with the same value, with the same values. So it's the same contract, same function, blah, blah, and then the different country for the location of the data. And that we fixed also at the level of the data point model to ensure that the keys are working and this is not being highlighted as the data quality issue, which we have unfortunately in the dry run. So these are the key changes. But again, if you want to follow the track changes, if you go to the website under the links which are provided here to the 15th of October, you have most of the track changes there. Now, EUID, being the elephant in the room, the biggest change which we saw in the ITS is the introduction of the EUID, which is the European identifier, which is available for most of the EU-registered companies, which are subject to the registration in the National Business Register. Why I'm saying most? Because some of the companies are not registered in the National Business Register, and therefore they may not be having the EUID. And this EUID is required now to be used as an alternative or as a possibility. So what the text of the ITS or the final ITS says, that financial entities shall use a valid LAI or European Unique Identifier, and where available, both of these identifiers to identify all the ICT third-party service providers. So there is a choice, but there is also a limitation in terms of what could be used and what could be verified. Now, where you can find the EUID is one good source of that is what this commission called, and this is managed by the European Commission, is the Business Register Interconnection System, also called BRIS system. You have a link here, where you just go there, search by the company or the registration company, and then you have the card for that company. And on that card, and I'm using the specifically, I'm picked that example because we're dealing here with Amazon Web Services. So colleagues from Amazon Online, apologies for using you as an example. But what I wanted to show is that it's the third country company with the EU presence. So you have the EU entity. It's registered in Luxembourg. It has an EU registration number in the business register, and therefore it has an EU ID. And here we highlighted here on the slide in yellow, that's the EU ID of this company. Now, there is only concern here is that this BRIS register interconnection system does not have any APIs and does not allow for the batch processing. So the only way how you can find these EUIDs through using BRIS, there might be any alternative sources of the search, so I don't know about, but at least using the BRIS, what you can do is the manual searches. So you put your companies from the contracts if you want to use EUIDs, and then you search it from there. So this is the possibility, and this is the biggest innovation in the final ITS coming from the European Commission. Now, we had to adjust the ITS also to facilitate for this possibility of having conditionality and optionality between the identifiers, and then having two identifiers where available. So most of the changes have been made to the template B0501, which is about the list of the third-party providers. So all the extra group, all the intra-group, all the parents of the third-party providers should be recorded in this template. And here we had before already two first data fields, the identifier, identification code, and the type of the identification code. So we kept those codes. We clarified the instructions that there you can use LAI or EUID. So these are the two key values which are used to link the third-party providers with everything else in the register. So these are mandatory, the identification code and the type of identification code. And here you have a choice of using LAI or UID if you talk about EU registered legal persons. Now, to facilitate for the possibility of having two identifiers provided, we introduce additional data fields, which is B01, B0501, 0030, and 0040, which is additional identifier and the type of the additional data identifier. So these are new data fields, which will allow you to say in 0010 report LAI and in 0030 report EUID. So to facilitate this, what the Commission has said. Now, because we for the data quality checks, and also as Valentina explained, we have been checking LAI using the data from the GLIFE. We're also trying to check EUIDs from data which is available in BRIS. But there is also a particularity with the legal names and the way how they're reflected in the business registers, especially if we're dealing with the Cyrillic or the Greek alphabets of the EU registered companies. So to facilitate that, we have also introduced additional data field 05010060, saying that the name of the ICT third-party provider in Latin alphabet. So we have 0050 data field, which requires you to provide the legal name of the third-party providers in the applicable alphabet. So if you are dealing with the Greek company, then the legal name of the Greek company as registered in the National Business Register is in Greek alphabet. So we would like you to report in 050 that legal name in Greek alphabet. But then also to facilitate all the work and the searches and understanding of that Greek alphabet in 0060, we ask you to repeat the same name in Latin alphabet, which is most probably commonly used elsewhere in the documentation. So there is additional data field to facilitate the names in the Greek and Cyrillic alphabets and the names in the Latin alphabet. And if you have the name in the Latin alphabet already, then 0050 should equal 0060. So you should repeat the same name in two places. And this has been explained in the instructions, in updated instructions in the final ITS. So these are, in terms of the additional information, additional requirements, these are the 3 additional data points which we have introduced into template 0501 based on the introduction of the EOID and based on the final text of the EOID. So this is the delta or the final adaptation, which I was referring to you before, what you will need to look at if when finalizing the registers. Obviously, use of EUID is a choice. You don't have to use a EUID. You can stick to LAIs, what was already there, and use the LAIs, and then just as long as the first 2 data fields on these templates are filled in with the appropriate keys, this is all fine for us for the analysis and also for the referential integrity of the templates. And last point on the EUID is just to recap what sort of the optionality is there. And I saw also questions in the slide, or what about the other codes which were allowed to be used in the dry run? So in the dry run was a bit more flexible, because first it was run on the draft ITS, and also we, from our side, considering that this was a learning exercise, we exhibited quite a lot of flexibility. Now, considering that we have the final legal requirement, the flexibility is no longer there, and this is quite strict. So the type of the code which is permitted very much depends on the domiciliation of the entity, whether we are dealing with the third-party provider which is registered in the EU or in the third country, and the type, whether the third-party provider is the legal person or the natural person. So if you have a legal entity which is registered in the EU, then you have a choice of using LAI or EUID. Given that both should be available, EUID is available de facto for all EU registered legal entities, with some exceptions depending on the national registration status, and LAI is the voluntary that needs to be obtained. So there is 2 codes which are available. If you are dealing with a third-party provider, which is the third country registered legal entity, and it cannot have the EUID, because it's not EU registered, and then the only code which is identifier code which is available to be used there is LAI. And if you're dealing with the individual acting in business capacity, irrespective whether this individual is individual from the EU or individual from other countries, then the choice is wider. Then you have the LAI, corporate registration number, VAT number, passport number, or national identity number. So this freedom of using additional identifiers, which we had in the draft ITS and in the dry run, is now reduced to only natural persons. And for the legal entities, it's mostly LAI or EU ID. And this is the legal requirement. This is what it is. And there were already questions in the slide of what to do if there's no LAI or EU ID. Well, with EU ID is easy. If it's a registered company, then you need to flag it and find it in the business register, or ask the third-party provider for that, because they cannot refuse it, and it should be there. With LAI, it's a little bit more complicated. This is just an encouragement to talk with your third-party providers to obtain for them to acquire LAI and use the LAI as the global identifier, because frankly, it's also in their interest, considering also all the benefits and all the benefits of the LAI, and the fact that LAI is meeting all the criteria for the good identifier used for the record keeping. So this is, having LAI is in good interest of all parties. And this is not that costly for the third-party providers to obtain. That's the answer also to the few questions regarding LAIs which we had in the slide. Now, before I stop my longish monologue, a couple of slides and on the reporting timelines and what is going to happen next year. So the official reporting from 2025, in terms of the process, in terms of the sequence, is going to be more or less the same what we had in the dry run. So it's a sequential reporting where financial entities report to their competent authorities, and then the competent authorities report the data to the ESAs. And we have provided the legal basis for that second part of the reporting, so the reporting from the competent authorities to the ESAs. And this is regulated by the ESAs decisions, which the boards of supervisors of 3 ESAs have adopted on 8th of November, and we publish it on 15th of November. You have a link here for that decision, which basically deals with all the information that competent authorities shall provide to the ESAs for the purposes of the CTPP designation. So this decision is about the reporting of necessary information to the ESAs, which we will be using for the CTPP designation. And naturally, as I also mentioned before, the registers of information is the key source of that information. So this is about the reporting from the competent authorities to the ESAs. And this reporting is to be done on an annual basis. Now, we're not setting in that decision any specific timelines or the processes how financial entities will report the registers to their competent authorities. So this is very much national, and this is very much depending on the approaches of the competent authorities. So if you have information how I report to my competent authorities and when, please refer to your competent authorities. We are not able to answer these questions, but we expect that this reporting is to happen naturally before the reporting deadlines and timelines from the financial entity, from the competent authorities to the ESAs. And if we talk to reporting timelines, we have basically two cases. We have the first year of application of DORA, which is in 2025, which kicks in January next year. There we are suggesting somewhat different timeline compared to the 2026 and onwards reporting, which we see as a more steady state reporting. So starting from the bottom, starting from the 2026 reporting, where things are hopefully going to be a little bit easier and more settled. There, the timelines for the reporting to the ESAs is the remittance deadline of 31st of March every year, with the reference date of the registers of 31st December of preceding year. So this is how we are seeing the process going on from 2026 onwards. Now, 2025 is more complicated, where we, considering that this is the first year of application and considering that DORA applies from the January 2025, we try to give you as much of time possible to prepare the registers and finalize the registers, also considering the changes necessary, all these deltas which need to be implemented into the registers. We try to give you as much time as possible, but also we have quite a long timeline on the side of ESAs for the CTPP designation. If you read DORA carefully, you identify that there is quite a lot of decisions, quite a lot of steps to be mentioned, to be passed, including the 6-week hearing period with the potential CTTPs where they can agree or object with them being designated as the critical third-party providers. So what we have agreed with the competent authorities, and which has a significant implications for you, is the deadline of reporting from the competent authorities to the ESAs in 2025 set to 30th of April. With the reference date of 31st March of 2025. So we expect that the competent authorities will tell you to provide the registers before April. So somewhere between March and April, they will ask you to provide your registers to the competent authorities. Then the competent authorities may run some data quality checks using the validation rules which we have provided, and then they will pass this information, these registers, to us by the 30th of April. And then we are going to apply the data quality checks and validation rules on our end. So what we are going to do is more or less similar process as Valentina described for the dry run exercise. We will be applying technical checks. And if you go to the documents which we published on 15th of November and which are also linked here, in the list in the Excel file of the technical and validation rules, we have the one worksheet which lists the technical checks, which are basically similar to the current technical checks which we are running on all the reporting submissions to see whether the file names are correct, whether they're meeting the applied naming conventions, to see whether the composition of the zip files is correct, whether all the CSVs are included or nothing else can be added, whether we will see the composition of the CSV files, that the columns are there and nothing has been added. So these are the technical checks. And based on those technical checks, we will provide automatic feedback to the submitter, competent authorities, and if there's something failing there, then the competent authorities will need to be resubmit the data to us. So they will either rectify the issues themselves if they can, or they can go back to you and ask you to resubmit. Now, if the registers passing those technical checks, then we will have a list of approximately 125 data quality checks, which are in a way similar to the dry run, so the similar to ones we already published and which you have been familiar, but as we have taken lessons learned from the exercise, we have adjusted them. We have also expanded them to cover information and data fields which are super critical for the designation of the critical ICT third-party providers. So the list is there. We will applying those checks based on the data which will pass the technical checks. So what we call the data point model-based checks, and also the business checks. So we will check the validity of the LAIs and EUIDs. And based on that, we will prepare a feedback which will be provided to the competent authorities. And then the competent authorities will be given time to resubmit this information to us before the designation cutoff date. And this is important to keep in mind. And I did not put this specifically on the slide, but Mark already mentioned in his intervention that for 2025, we have the reporting deadline, 30th of April, and then we have the cutoff date for ourselves for the 31st of May. So the 31st of May, we would like to freeze the data for the analysis of the CTPP designation. So this will be the data set after the 31st of May, which we will use in June to run necessary calculations and identifications, modifications of the identifications of the relations and grouping of the third-party providers to come up with the list of the critical ICT third-party providers. So this is going to happen after the cutoff date, and all the resubmissions will be possible, or we will be taken into account in that data set before the cutoff date. So the timelines for 2025 are extremely important. Obviously, you can resubmit after that date. The data will be still analyzed and processed, but we will not be able to use that data in the CTPP designation because we have a extremely tight, especially in 2025 being the first year, extremely tight timeline for the CTPP designation. Now, the points which I mentioned here in the beginning of the slide, I've been walking through them already quite a few times today. So there will be a final publication of the complete technical package, which will cover the final data point model, final validation rules, and the taxonomies. And we expect this in the coming days before Christmas. So before we all break for the for Christmas holidays, you will have the complete package there. Now, the important point to keep in mind here in the blue box in the middle of the slide is that as we worked with the development of the technical package and validation rules and data point model using the October version of the ITS, and there have been some minor changes in the final ITS. We have a bit of the inconsistency somewhere between the instructions provided in the ITS and the data point model. There is nothing major, and an example of that inconsistency is, for example, how we deal with the empty values. So in the instructions, we are saying that if you don't have a data point, or if you don't have a value for the data point, you just report an empty value, you just report an empty data point. However, for example, this cannot work for the key values. So if you have the ID identifier which is missing, and then you cannot report just empty identifier, there needs to be identifier, because otherwise the links with other templates and other data points is not going to work. So there we introduce, for example, not applicable values. And these things, there are a couple of the similar points we are planning to explain through the Q&As. So we are working currently on the Q&As. We will not be able to publish them before Christmas as everything else. So those Q&As will spill over to January, just to clarify those points. So if you want a complete package of everything, so you have the ITS now, final, legal, adopted. You will have in the coming days the data point model, again, final, adopted, and working. And then the missing bit will be this couple of Q&As which will align the data point model with the ITS instructions and provide some clarifications where there might be some inconsistencies which are already covered in the data point model. So this will come in January. And then after those Q&As, we may say that you have a complete package from the legal side. Right. Last slide in this longest presentation is the overview of all the reference materials and what I've been mentioning through the slides. We have the dedicated page on the ESA's, well, we're hosting that on the EBA website, but ESA colleagues are on their website are replicating that and referring to that. So you have the dedicated page where we collected all the information regarding the dry run and the preparations for 2025 exercise. And here you have additional links to the decision, ITS, data point model, validation rules, and the link to where the final technical package is going to be published in the coming days. It's not there yet, but it will be there soon. Now I stop here with the slides, and then we go to the questions and answers slide session. And I see quite a lot of things in Slido. And I don't know, I ask Valentina, do you have any questions on the data quality which you can answer? In the meantime, I'll read the questions for the rest.
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
So there were some questions regarding the feedback. Some users were puzzled because they did not receive the feedback, and so they were not sure about what this was meaning. So as we said before, we have prepared feedback and transferred it to NCAs. So no direct feedback has been provided or will be provided from the ESAs to the entities for the dry run. So in case you have not received feedback, this could mean two things. One is either you are part of the 6.5% of the entities that did not fail any data quality checks, or there may have been a glitch in the transmission of the feedback from your NCA to you. So if in doubt, we encourage you to liaise with your NCA to check this out. The feedback was provided to the NCAs end of September, so we're confident that NCAs have done the possible to transmit this feedback. Some users were also asking for where they could find the 116 checks. These are published as an annex to the report, the conclusive report that was published yesterday. Others were asking where the new, let's say, validation rules can be found, so the one valid for official reporting. And as Oleg mentioned, these will be published as part of the technical package that the ESAs will publish before year end. So there will be the list of validation rules. And I'm just scrolling through the list. There were several questions on the format of reporting. So here as well, I think I can reply that the format is unchanged with respect to the dry run, meaning that zip files containing CSV and the JSON will be requested. What changes is the content of the fields that are going to be asked in some templates. And this will be, so the annotated templates would be made available in the technical package very soon. Some users were asking what happens if we fail validation rules for official reporting. Here I would say it depends on on how serious the issue is. So if there is the equivalent of an integration check which is blocking, for instance, a wrong format that is used, then the file will not be integrated. So you will probably receive feedback upon submission. If instead there is an issue with a data point that has been reported in a wrong way or that is missing, you will receive feedback as part of the feedback that is provided as usual from the validation rules. I would say, Oleg, that this covers
Thank you, Valentina.
part. Yeah.
Thank you, Valentina. And just to add this point on this validation rules, so in the feedback for the official reporting, we are not planning to differentiate between the criticality of the feedback. So we will apply all the data quality assurance and validation rules, whatever you call them, and then we will provide you one comprehensive feedback about everything. So you will have the list of all issues which we have identified for all the data points. We are not there yet with the exact format, how it's going to look like. So we are working on that at the moment. But in terms of the process, it's important to keep in mind that we will not go in stages, that there will be two stages. Technical feedback, as we cannot integrate and process the files, that will come fast, that will come fast and first, and then with some delay because we need to run also the checks of the EUIDs, we will provide the integrated feedback on all data quality rules, trying to limit the amount of iterations back and forth as much as possible, considering that we will have super limited time especially in 2025, only 1 month of May, from 30th of April to 31st of May, to run all this back and forth for the potential resubmissions. And this is something new to the dry run, because in the dry run, as you recall, we did not have any resubmissions, so it was just one go. And then we analyzed what we have received. Now, I suggest that I will go through the top voted questions and then try to answer them. And colleagues from the ESAs online, please also feel free to pitch in with your answers, since the questions are all visible. Now, the first one is when and where we can find updated template Excel file. Now, as I said, we don't believe the Excel is the tool to keep the register, so it's unlikely that we will provide the Excel file for filling in the way that it was done for the dry run exercise. However, there will be Excel file as part of the technical package. We also published what we call annotated template, or annotated template format. So you will have the Excel file with all the data fields and explanations of the data fields and the values. So in a similar format, what you already have in the draft data point model published in May, you will have the final one published in the coming days, and there will be this template. But this is not the template for filling, because we don't think that Excel is the right tool. I saw also later on in this list follow-up questions of what do we think is the correct tool. Well, we are not advising, we cannot advise you on the tool, apart from saying that it should be appropriate for your needs and appropriate for your risk management needs. Well, obviously, I would think something with the visualizations and the network analysis, because you need to see the dependencies, and the colleagues in the risk management functions need to see those dependencies between the different contracts and functions. So that you cannot achieve with Excel. So Excel is not the tool for the actual register. Now, there is a bit of the question on the LAI codes and what to do if it's not available. I think I covered that in my intervention. We need to have, well, legally there is very limited choice of what can be done. For the financial entities, LAI is a must. So basically in template B0101 and B0102, we should be able to see only LAIs. And if financial entities, which are you or somewhere a part of your groups, do not have LAIs, then it's about the time to obtain those LAIs, because that's the legal requirement under DORA. This LAIs for financial entities has been widely used in the other prudential and statistical reporting in the financial sector, but we understand that some financial entity types which have not been subject to reporting may not have LAIs, so you need to obtain those LAIs. And for the third-party providers, it's either UID, if you can find it for the EU company, or LAI. And LAI, well, just talk to your providers and obtain the LAIs. There is also a possibility, if I understand from the GLIFE, that you can obtain LAIs on the behalf of somebody, but then it comes with the additional complications. So it's the best in the interest of the third-party providers. And we're actually having quite a few third-party providers on the call also today. Colleagues just obtain the LAIs, because this is really good identifier which has very useful second layer of information about the parent and child relation, which is crucial for this work and also crucial for any other reporting work when we speak about the consolidation. So please talk to your providers if they do not have EU IDs and you cannot find it, and especially for the third countries, just ask them to get the LAIs. Now, the test uploading, so the question with 164 likes, where there been opportunity for financial entities to test upload the final register prior to regulatory go live. As I said, the reporting is sequential, so ESAs are not accepting any registers from the financial entities directly. It's the competent authorities who are collecting the registers from the financial entities. So please speak to your competent authorities what solutions, which are tools are they using to collect, and whether there will be any testing there. We will run some tests, especially connectivity tests on our side with the competent authorities, but we don't see like the formal testing period and formal testing submissions. Dry run was used for that purpose. All right, the 124 likes, the 5 ranges, and the retention period. I think I answered that question already. So it depends on your internal data management rules and then retention periods. But when it comes to reporting, please do not report expired contracts. So if you may decide that you need to keep the registers with expired contracts based on your data retention rules within your organizations, please do not report. Please report what you have live contracts at the reference date. So this is very much important for us to keep in mind, also to reduce the amount of data points which are flying from one side to another side. Now, another questions on the LAI and EUID. I've answered that. Now, interesting question regarding with 79 likes regarding the DORA register of information and the outsourcing register, and where they will coexist next to DORA. So here it's important to keep in mind that DORA register covers the ICT third-party providers and ICT contractual relations, and this is a big part of the outsourcing, but not everything what outsourcing is, because you may have equally non-ICT related outsourcing, which needs to be also managed in the appropriately managed needs to be also part of the third-party risk management, and for that we have the guidelines on outsourcing. So from the ESA side, we are currently revising and updating all the existing pre-DORA guidelines on the outsourcing, which we will cover, and we will try to draw a line between the ICT and non-ICT. And in terms of the collection of the registers, here the important authority has, for example, ECB, they have been collecting outsourcing registers, and they have already provided some communications back in the summer that later on they see a convergence between the an optimization of the reporting flow, so you don't need to report twice. I guess the competent authorities provide more data, more information on that in due course. And also from our side, we are updating all our outsourcing guidelines, so you will have the more concrete answers there. Now, questions regarding the technical formats, I think we also try to answer that this is the same plain CSV format, the files, the examples of the reporting packages are there, and we are going to use exactly the same approach, and the final taxonomy is coming in the coming days. So there will be XBRL taxonomy to be used in this plain reporting file. Now, track changes version, I also covered. We do not have the track changes vis-a-vis the final ITS published by the Commission in the official journal. There is a track changes version to the with the changes from introduced by the ESAs published on the 15th of October. This is more or less the same, with the exceptions of some minor changes in the final ITS. So if you want to track changes, you can use the 15th of October changes. The question from Niklas with 48 likes about support functions. Yes, this is something which we have identified. So the list of the license activities, there was a discrepancy between the data point model and the drop-downs used in the dry run. We have clarified that in FAQ, and this has been amended also in the final technical package. So this has been added, so the support functions will be there. So don't worry about that. Now, there is a question, popular question from Agnieszka, which has been already answered. So if you have multiple ICT services supporting the same contract, so then do you need to report the numbers, the different rows? Yes, basically, if you have something else, something different, you always need to add rows. Therefore, in quite many data templates, we're using a combination of different data fields as a key, so we don't have the problem with the referential integrity. And this has been also revised based on the feedback of the dry run. So please use as many data points as possible. Sorry, as many rows as needed. Indeed, it may somewhat grow the register unnecessarily, but this is how the register is designed, and this is how competent authorities also would like to see the data for their own analysis. Another question on identifiers, which we covered. Now, there is an interesting question from Anonymous with 43 likes. So do financial entities which are regulated themselves and are expected to fill in the register need to be listed if they provide services falling in the scope of DORA to other financial entities? So the composition of there is the interesting point on the obligation to keep the register, which basically is all financial entities in the scope of DORA need to have the register. So you need to have the register. So you need to have the entities. If you're submitting the register as part of the group, then they need to be obviously all financial entities mentioned in listed in template B0102. But in terms of what ICT services they provide and what are they not providing, and whether the regulated service is part of the, is regulated service is also ICT service. This is something which has been raised quite a lot, many times. This is something which has been raised also in the FAQs for the dry run. And I'm afraid here we don't have a definite answer on that. So we don't have a definite definition of the ICT service and explanation. There is a Q&A which is currently at the hands of the colleagues from the European Commission, because this is the point affecting the interpretation of the legislation. So level 1 legislation, that's for the Commission to come up. So there is still, the discussion is ongoing, but hopefully with the publication of that Q&A, there will be a clarity on the definition of the ICT services and what services you need to record in the register. But in terms of entities, if the entity is within the scope of DORA, then you need to provide it, and that needs to be covered in the register. Interesting question on the languages. Should the register of information be provided in English to local competent authorities, or can local language be provided? Now, for that, we don't have a definite answer, because technically this is now the register is part of the EU legislation, so everything should be in the EU languages, and they all equal. So the best is to check with your competent authorities whether they will accept what languages they will accept. And from the ESA side, we will be accepting everything, because we are obliged by law to accept everything. But with the competent authorities, whether they can accept English or whether they need to be in the other EU language, in the national language, or vice versa, this question is best to check with them, because they will be also working with the registers of information. Now, another question on the LAI in UID and corporate registration number, which we already questioned. Now, a question with 33 likes on the group remains unanswered on the EBA website. Does the scope of the groups consider intragroup outside the EU, or should be non-EU entities treated more like the ICT third-party providers in the register? So this is the point which we try to clarify already in the instructions and in the reporting decisions. So when we are dealing with the easy way is to speak without the EU group. So if you have the EU group and then you report the EU group in the register, then you obviously fill in template B0102, and then you will have to also intergroup service providers, which will be recorded then in us also in the template B0501, which is the list of the third-party providers, which needs to have not only extra group but intergroup. If you are part of the, let's say, the international group and do not have any sub-consolidation in the EU and report on the standalone basis, then basically 0102 template should have only you're reporting on standalone basis. But you have the intra-group providers there, and these guys will need to, from your parent, from the outside of the EU, and these guys will need to be listed in B0501. So the composition, what is listed in B0501, does not change in terms of whether you are standalone, whether you're part of the EU group and reporting at the consolidated level, or whether you're part of the international group and getting your services from your parent undertaking or from the intra-group service providers, which are in the part of your group you belong to, but in the third countries. So this still needs to be, that intergroup service provider still needs to be reported in template B0501, because this is a provider and needs to be treated equally with all other providers. So this is the answer I can give. But since the question is pointing out to the Q&A, I probably should also mention an important point. Is what is going to happen with these questions and what is going to happen with our support to the future reporting. And this is a bit challenging because, as you're aware, with the dry run, we run it based on the draft, so we did not have the final legal requirements there. The ITS was not part of the EU legislative body; it was just a draft. We did this on best efforts basis with you and also with us. We provided the interpretations and the answers to the questions as a staff, but now we are legally constrained with not being able to do that, since the ITS is formally legally adopted, and we cannot provide the staff-based interpretation of that, what we think, what I think, or what my colleagues think. So we will need to, the only way to follow is if you have interpretation questions regarding the ITS requirements, what this data field and how I do this and that, and what should I understand there, is the only way is to go through the formal Q&As and submit the Q&As, and then it will take some time, but then we will provide the answer through the Q&A procedure, which is and say more legally sound than the simple FAQ. So we will not be able to maintain FAQs as we did in the dry run. We will try to, sorry, there were also questions, what will happen with these questions. So we will see how we can kind of summarize them. So we will do something not before Christmas, but in January, based on this session also. So we might be looking at another update of the FAQs based on this interaction, but we will not deal with any of the questions which are of requiring interpretation of the legislation, so require interpretation of the ITS, because we are not able to handle it through the FAQs and non-official channels. So Q&As will be then from now on is the only appropriate way to ask your questions regarding the ITS interpretations. Another question another question from Anonymous, whether we are expecting to receive registers only for the critical or all ICT vendors. So this is important to keep in mind, and we have had several questions in the Q&A, that there's no critical ICT third-party providers from the point of view of the financial entities. So this analysis in the EU legislation, the notion of the CTPP of the critical ICT third-party provider, they will become critical only after designations, after formal designation by the ESAs based on the information we receive from the registers. So once we run the reporting and the analysis and the designation stage next year, towards the end of 2025, we will have the list of the critical ICT third-party providers in Europe, which will be subject to the DORA oversight by the ESAs. So that's the critical ICT third-party providers. In the registers, you also have the notion of critical and important functions, which are your functions with the financial entities. So basically, the register needs to cover all of your functions, and out of which you need to say what functions are critical. And there was a question on the 80% also, whether this is something what we expected or not. But basically, the register will need to have the analysis of all your functions, also list of the identifying which of your functions are based on your assessment critical or important. And then for those critical and important functions, you will provide additional information in the registers. So yes, we expect to receive everything, but most naturally, as had been handled also during the public hearing when we were developing the ITS on the register of information, the proportionality element is there, and the proportionality is the identification of the critical important functions within the financial entities. So the more information you have on the critically important functions, the more details we expect to receive there. And therefore, also the answering the questions whether 80% of functions being critical or important is something what we expected. The answer is yes, because we expected the emphasis of the registers being on the critical or important functions for the financial entities. So you provide information regarding what ICT providers, what services they are offering to you, what functions they are supporting, and based on that information, we will designate the ICT third-party providers as critical. Now, there's another question on the outsourcing arrangements, which we mentioned already. A few questions on the updates of the templates and the data point models, and not ITS and not aligned. As I said there, again, the ITS is final. The data point model, which is going to be published in the coming days, is aligned with the ITS, with the exceptions of a couple of points which we will be clarifying in the Q&As, which will come out in January. And then the template, the dry run templates, we will not be updating them. That's been already clearly said. Again, question on the reporting formats. We have dealt with that. Another question on LAI. Question from Laurent on whether we have an option of EU as the data storage. I'm afraid no, it's the country based. So that's basically the issue is that if you have several countries, then you need to add the several lines. So if you have data which is in data center in Netherlands and in Spain, then you basically need to repeat the line with the entry with the same information and having two different lines, one for or two different rows, one for Netherlands, one for Spain. Now, question from Rene is interesting. This I already tried to explain is that indeed in the dry run and also as Valentina pointed that we have an inconsistency in the way how data quality checks were applied in the dry run. We were not able to identify that ICT providers or the financial entities are standalone, and then basically the identification code for the parents were missing, and this has been highlighted as an error. So this what we have added to the instructions to the ITS that if you are dealing with the standalone companies, be it either on the financial entity or the ICT, then you need to repeat your own LAI. So the identifier code of the financial entity, of the parent financial entity, and of the parent ultimate parent undertaking for the third-party providers will always need to be filled. It cannot be empty. So you either fill it in with the real identifier for that parent, if there is the parent exists, or if you're dealing with a standalone entity, you just repeat your own LAI there, or the LAI or the identifier of the third-party provider there. So we always have a value in the update field. Otherwise, the validation rule will not be able to run because we don't have the data fields differentiating whether it's a standalone entity or part of the group. So there was a choice when we were finalizing either adding more data fields or clarifying the instructions. And we thought that clarifying the instructions and asking to copy paste the value is easier than adding additional data fields. Question from Eric with 23 likes, and I'm just, if you try to follow me, I'm going down the likes basis. Technical validations and the technical validation rules. We published already validation rules in the human readable form in the 15th of November. So you have it links also here, and on the complete technical side, the technical and technical language is going to be published in the coming days. So it's all there in the data point and the data dictionary. It's all being currently finalized. Question regarding the ICT services. Well, I already alluded to the Q&A on the ICT services. What is definition is coming there. Question from Anonymous regarding the tool. I'm afraid we will not be able to maintain the tool. So the CSV, Excel CSV converter will not be provided for the official reporting. Question regarding the referencing to the outsourcing arrangements. Well, this is the same ITS. This is the ITS on the Register of Information of contractual arrangements with the ICT third-party provider. So it's just a different name used. Apologies for that. Any indication on the Q&A on the definition of the ICT services is I'm afraid this is this question on that particular Q&A, which is of great interest for the industry on the definition of the ICT services and what should be included. When this Q&A is going to be published, we cannot say that. This is the Category 1 Q&A being handled by the EU Commission. There are lots of discussions going on. So when the discussions will be finalized, I'm afraid we are not able to say. But hopefully we are on the final stage, or the colleagues in the Commission are on the final stage in the discussions. The interesting question is it possible that unregulated parent company maintains the one register of information for its regulated daughter companies? It is possible. You can outsource the register, and that's covered in the instructions. You can also submit the register at the level of the holding company, mixed financial companies, or financial holding companies. This is all explained in the instructions, but then if we're talking about this outsourcing, then the entity submitting the register needs to be identified with the LAI. That's the additional limitation there, because we are only able to accept the LAIs there for the reporting entities. A question from Laurent on the ICT EBA outsourcing guidelines and other INIPANGs on the register of information. There are no there should be no impact given the primacy of the ITS and the DORA register, and then the guidelines which have a lower priority in terms of the regulatory products. Then there will be no impacts on the DORA register, but there might be impacts the other direction. So the outsourcing guidelines have been reviewed in light of the DORA introduction and in light of the DORA registers. So the DORA registers, what we are talking about, will not change once the outsourcing guidelines are adopted and made available. So that will not have impact on the DORA register. What's the end game? A question from the anonymous. What's the end game of the exercise? Well, the end game is today. We have tried our best to help you with the preparation of the registers. We have reviewed your registers. We have shared the feedback from the registers with you. We have took the lessons from our side. We learned, we finalized, and we're using this information also to help out with our IT processes for the analysis of the registers next year, and to refine the solutions what we are putting in place to help with the CTPP designation next year based on that information. We are not going to use this information for the CTPP designation, so we've been clear about that since the beginning, that this is the test, let's say, this is the test environment, and the production environment and production work is next year. But the workshop today, the publication of the report yesterday is hopefully the end game for the dry run, which is actually important point is that we are still receiving questions from the industry regarding the feedback. We would also like to draw through the feedback which we provided during the dry run, and considering the fact that we've provided this feedback, well, in October, as Valentina said, even in September, and then you may have got it from the competition authorities in October. We had quite a long time to facilitate and answer the questions on the feedback, so we will not be able to maintain this rate of the responses if you still have questions on the feedback. So please keep this in mind, that we will not be able to answer all these questions. So drawing the line in that dedicated email channel can be also considered the end game of this dry run. Now, the reference date for the first reporting of the register is 31st of March. Does it mean that the contracts which expired before the 1st of April do not have to be included in the register? So yes, basically you have all the contracts which are valid on the 31st of March should be reported in the register. If you have something which was expired there and it has not been prolonged and renewed, then this contract is outside of the reporting register. You may still keep it in your own register for your own business purposes, subject to the retention discussions which we had before, but you don't need to report it. Also on the collection from, sorry, I missed that question. Does it mean that no register will be collected by CAs before April? Well, that I cannot say. That very much depends on the agreement with and the positions of the competent authorities, what they are going to set for the collection of the registers from the competent authorities. As you recall from my slide, what we had is the timeline for the submissions to the ESAs. But in order for the competent authorities to be able to maintain this timeline, they need to collect the registers from EU, from the financial entities. So when they are going to collect, we don't have this information for, there are more than 40 competent authorities around the EU, so they may all have different timelines. So the regulator and regulated, we dealt with that. Data point definitions, there are still many contradictions and ambiguities, definitions of data points, particularly for the entity types. How should we reconcile the difference between the regulations, the draft taxonomy, and the master data template? Well, I'm not aware of any remaining contradictions. The final ITS is there. The draft taxonomy, sorry, the final taxonomy, which is going to be published in the coming days, is aligned to the final ITS, so there should be no contradictions. There are a couple of points coming in the Q&As, but they are not relating to the definition of the data fields. And the master template does not exist. The data point model exists. So, but if you have any questions regarding also the documents which will be published as part of the technical package in the coming days, please don't hesitate to send the Q&A on that. Another group of questions on the format. So no XLS, no Excel. Yes, no Excel is being reported, only CSVs in the zip format, in the zip file, according to the reporting specification, which is published on the website. Now there is questions on the resellers and the purchases. I think it's been answered. I know, that's the CNA. Sorry, the question, I lost the question. Okay, I lost the question on the reseller, sorry, apologies. There is a question on the filling in the templates for the branches. If you don't have branches, well, if you don't have branches, you just send empty templates. That's it. The templates will be empty. Again, the question on the questions for, okay, another question on the branches, what code to be used if the branch, well, if the branch has LEI, then you use the LEI for that branch. If the branch doesn't have the LEI, then you can use your own code, which you identify, and then this is explained in the instructions of the ITS. So you have the identification code for the branch. Questions regarding FAQ 7475. This is the famous definition of ICT service. I'm afraid I don't have anything else to add to what I just said. Another question on the EUID LAI. I don't know, colleagues on the line, are you also following the questions? Is there anything else what we can answer, these as colleagues?
Maybe Oleg, the fact that we indicated that Excel is not a valid tool for maintaining the register has been causing some confusion, at least from what I can see in some of the questions. Probably we could say that, okay, we leave the choice to the entities to choose whatever system and technical solution they want to keep the registers. If they want to keep using Excel, I think this is still a viable option. But what's important for us is that the registers are submitted in a zip file in CSV format. And also, even if you choose to use the Excel, please refrain from using the Excel template that was previously published for the dry run, as there have been some changes to the fields that are contained there. Some new information are being requested, like the UID, and also some changes to the DPM have been made. So probably I hope this clarifies a bit. If an entity wants to use Excel to maintain the register, that's fine, but that's it.
Yeah, thank you, Valentina. Perhaps I was a bit too harsh in my commenting, but I was thinking more from us providing the Excel template, because indeed if you're a small entity with very simple contracts, and maybe Excel is quite sufficient. So we're not commenting on what is the most appropriate tool for you to use. That's for you to decide. But yes. And I then there is another one. I've just scrolled back to the top of the list. So after the template, the second most popular question is whether we have a copy of the Q&As for that. So what I can say is that we will try to do our best to do the update of the FAQ. So let's say it will be our last update of the dry run FAQ based on this Q&As and what we have in this section, and that will be the end game. I really like the term end game suggested by some anonymous there. So we will summarize these questions and then make them available, but that will probably take time considering the upcoming Christmas holidays. So in terms of the next steps with this exercise, so you have the report published already yesterday. The report contains quite a lot of key points which we have mentioned today. We will also make the slides from this event available on the website and the recording available on the website. So you will have these two, and then we will aim at having this updated FAQs based on these questions which we have received, and then we will try to go also into more detailed questions which I did not handle today, somewhere in January, early February. So that we will do. And I'm also checking with my colleagues whether anything else we can cover. Well, with this in mind, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for being with us for almost 2.5 hours and bearing my voice. And apologies for not being able to cover all of the questions what you have submitted. But as we said in the beginning, that the idea was not to give you a training session on filling the registers of information, but to be broader. We are not able to train and explain all the details and specific individual cases. If you have questions like that, please refer to your competent authorities. If you have questions regarding the interpretation of the ITS, then going forward, given that the ITS is finally adopted, please submit your Q&A and we will handle it through the formal Q&A process. But we will try to answer as many of the questions from this Slido as part of the updated FAQ. And once it's done, then it will be the final line for the dry run exercise. Once again, on behalf of all ESA colleagues, really appreciate your engagement today, your engagement during this dry run exercise, and especially those colleagues from the financial entities who have worked hard on getting the registers, submitting the registers, and interacting with us during this process. This was a tremendous and tremendously valuable lessons learned experience for us. We learned a lot from these interactions and we made quite a few changes, and hopefully for good. So hopefully this exercise was as useful for you as it was useful for us. So thanks a lot again on behalf of all ESA colleagues working on the dry run, and well, good luck to you with the final preparations and getting the registers ready for the official reporting in 2025. Thank you very much.